All right. So to follow up a little bit from that video, I want to kind of walk through a little bit of my own home collection of spirits. I have some wine. I also have some beer, and I also want to just kind of showcase like how I at home sometimes consume the various spirits that we've talked about over the course of the semester. Again, for better or for worse here. I mean, a lot of these bottles, obviously, I've drank out of, and so you will see that they are not completely full. But that is not necessarily a one of the things about appreciating the taste is meaning that they do not necessarily go super quickly or that they go, overnight like a beer or like beer might. So a couple things that I personally like to kind of like experiment with, and I like to kind of have on hand at home. And I think it's going to even grow during this social distancing and quarantine, right? Is to be able to kind of have stuff that I know that I'm going to like, and also have spirits that I know that I can still kind of like recreate some cocktails that I've been familiar with where I work in Pullman. And in particular, those cocktail recipes that I showcased just a moment ago, um, a lot of them call for like fresh lemon juice or simple syrup or honey or something like that. And so I actually do kind of fresh squeeze my own lemons here. So I've got some lemon juice here, and then I also have actually like a little bit of a honey cordial. So it's pretty much just honey and then some hot water just to make it not as thick as a typical honey would be. And again, these can go in a variety of different drinks, whether that's with bourbon, whether that's with tequila, whether that's with gin, but just enough to kind of like have on hand in case I feel like kind of mixing a drink up. Now, my probably depending on so many factors, right? Um, who I'm drinking with, what the occasion might be, if it's cold outside, if it's hot outside, chances are the various spirits are going to be informed and they're going to be chosen on a lot of different factors. But chances are my kind of go-to spirit to work with and to enjoy is in fact bourbon. And bourbon is a particular kind of whiskey. And your assignment on Thursday, as you'll see, is to watch this really great documentary called Neat, and it is the history of bourbon. And so I'm not going to say too much about bourbon right now, just for the fact that you're going to have that information on Thursday, and you are going to have an assignment that will ask you about bourbon. So you'll see that in your folder for Thursday. The assignment will not show up until after 6 a.m. on Thursday. So if you click it on today, you're not going to be able to see the assignment, but the assignment will show up between 6 a.m. and midnight on Thursday. It's due midnight on Friday, I think. So anyway, my probably go-to spirit though is whiskey or bourbon. I think that there are nuances. I think that there are some really kind of wonderful expressions of what's going, of what a whiskey can do. And so, kind of my preferred bourbon at the moment is Elijah Craig. Okay, so you can see that I've gotten some good use out of it. But Elijah Craig, it kind of has a nice little depth to it, and it has a potency to it that is really wonderful. Works nice with lemon and honey, depending on the kind of drink that you might want to make. And then I also like for a little bit of a lighter bourbon. You can even tell this in color, maybe. Let's see here. It's called Basil Hayden's. Okay, so again, also a bourbon. And you might be able to tell that Elijah Craig is a little bit darker here than Basil Hayden, and that has to do with oak treatment on the bourbon. And again, you'll kind of learn about that. You'll learn about that on Thursday when you watch the Neat documentary. But another bourbon that I also enjoy, Basil Hayden. And then, interestingly, and this only is really stemmed from being a bartender, is when I think about spirits and kind of like the versatility of spirits, like, bourbon has a couple of flavors that it's going to work well with, but it also has some flavors that it's not going to work well with, and I will steer away from those flavors. But interestingly, rum has a really interesting place in kind of the spirit world here. And so this is a particular spiced rum, dark rum. It's not super dark, but it is called Sailor Jerry. And it's got, again, a little bit of spice to it. It's got a little bit of kind of brightness to it, a little bit of clove spice even. And again, this with lime, with soda, with all sorts of different things can be really, really pleasant depending on kind kind of the mood and what you're into. And then a couple of clear spirits that I have, and I don't have vodka at home, but I do have a nice little tequila. So again, and this is a tequila blanco. And so you'll see a couple different styles. And again, this kind of goes back. Can you see that? So this goes back to a little bit of our discussion on wine as well. Um, but in certain regions and certain styles of wine, they'll put on the label kind of various markers of what, um, how long that wine has been aged, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the same is true actually for tequila. And a lot of tequila that you might be familiar with is blanco. And the three kind of like styles of tequila are blanco, reposada, and anejo. And all that designates, because it's all again coming from agave, right? But what that designates, the blanco, reposada, and anejo, it designates the aging process. Okay, that anejo is going to be the longest aged tequila, and usually that's aged in barrel. Okay, but it's and you can see when you find an anejo tequila, it's going to be darker than this. Okay, yeah, but tequila, again, typical drink that one thinks of with tequila is going to be margarita. It is personally one of my favorite drinks, and yeah. And then another spirit that I just, or not another spirit, but another kind of style of this spirit that I just kind of came into was this Japanese gin, actually. And we just picked some up over at the bar that I work at, and I liked it so much that I bought a bottle pretty recently here. And this gin has kind of six different um, herbal kind of botanicals that are added into the process of distillation. And again, the primary one being juniper, but then a couple of other Japanese botanicals that I am particularly unfamiliar with, but it makes a really nice and nuanced gin. Okay? And so those are just some of the things that I have at home that, again, I've stumbled upon either as my work as a craft cocktail bartender or just kind of having conversations with others. But one thing that is really kind of like enlivening about all of this is this all does something very different, right? That this isn't just having a beer. It's not just having a glass of wine, but there is, again, maybe a little bit more versatility sometimes with spirits than just, beer or wine, right? Because that's one entity. And sure, I could have some of this gin, just kind of neat or straight, right? Similarly with tequila, right? Um, but there is kind of a versatility and and an openness, perhaps, to be able to kind of explore with some of these various spirits and cocktails. So, uh, and just because I'm so passionate about that exploration and that creativity, I do allocate a little bit of my resources to help build my kind of quote unquote in-home bar. To be able to facilitate that and be able to facilitate that kind of creativity. So hopefully kind of like seeing this and like recognizing that it's not just about, drinking booze, right? It's not just about having shots on shots on shots, but there is something that is, I think, more nuanced and more concentrated in the experience one can have with alcohol. And I think that's true across the board, whatever that may be, whether that's, again, beer, wine, or something else. But with spirits in particular, it doesn't just have to be a shot. It doesn't just have to be, a gin and tonic. If you like gin and tonics, you like gin and tonics. That's great. Drink that. Wonderful. Um, but there can be, again, an experimentation. There can be a creativity, all the while kind of like sharing that with others, sharing that with kind of, this expression of what you hope to experience, right? And maybe spirits unlock something different than beer or wine. So hopefully just kind of like seeing that and thinking a little bit more about it makes you maybe a bit more curious about spirits. And I think you'll really enjoy the documentary on Thursday called Neat. I think it is streaming on a couple of services, and you'll see a link that I've put on BB Learn. It goes to the trailer, I think, on YouTube, and you may have to pay $2 to rent and view it, but it's totally worth it. And I showed it last year, and and showing that. A lot of students said that they really, really enjoyed watching the documentary. So check your streaming services to see if it's on there. But if not, you do have access to rent it. It's about an hour 15, I think, about an hour 20 minutes probably. So um, go ahead and enjoy that. So, and you'll see that your assignment shows up on Thursday after 6 a.m. and it deals with some of our discussion from today and from Thursday. So, cheers.